Welcome to the Healing Heart podcast, where all healing is always a matter of the heart. I'm your host, Donna Campbell, also known as the Mind Whisperer, interviewing guest experts on all matters of healing. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Healing Heart podcast. I am your host, Donna Campbell, and on this podcast, we interview healers and spiritual leaders to bringing you the best, for you to always be empowered, be your authentic self, and of course, healing, because healing always takes place in the heart. My guest today is truly amazing. Gina Gardiner is the founder of Genuinely You Limited and of Gina Gardiner Associates. She hosts the Gina Gardiner and Friends syndicated radio show, which attracts in excess, get this, in excess of 1.5 million listeners every single month. She is a multiple #1 international bestselling author, a motivational speaker, a spiritual empowerment and transformational leadership champion, consultant, coach, and trainer with over 35 years of experience. Gina is incredibly passionate about helping people to step into their genuine, authentic power as individuals and as leaders, providing support and a challenge in totally non-judgmental and safe place so they can fulfill their true potential. So using her experience and the wisdom garnered over the last 30 plus years, she helps people who wish to accelerate their evolution so they can experience greater levels of spiritual awareness, confidence, happiness, and fulfillment. She supports business leaders to create and sustain significantly greater levels of success and profitability in a holistic and enlightened way. So welcome, Gina, here to the Healing Heart podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's a real privilege, and I really enjoyed having you on mine. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you.
It's been amazing, and I've gotten to know you very well over the last year that we have been sharing different wisdom and knowledge on all of these different platforms for people to gain. So share with me a little bit about how you got into using your wisdom, your knowledge into the spiritual leadership, helping business leaders create and sustain that holistic and enlightened way. How did you get into the business that you are in today?
I think I have to go back quite a long way. I started off my professional life as a teacher, and I loved it. Prior to that, I never quite knew where I fitted in, but I loved teaching, and I was promoted very quickly. So I became the youngest deputy principal in the area at the age of 28, and I was promoted to be the catalyst for change. I worked with the then principal, head teacher, and we had worked very hard. And in the February, we had a week's holiday and I went off skiing. Now, it was a very good skier, but I'd had a bad accident because I got new long skis and I'd fallen over. And so on the last day, I said to my friends, I'm just going to poddle about and I'm going to get my confidence back. Met them for lunch and they said, we found a fabulous new ski run. Come with us. Beautiful day, one of those hot sunny days in Europe when the sun is shining and you can ski in a t-shirt. They took the wrong turning, and instead of it being a 6 kilometer very, very nice red run, we ended up on a black diamond run full of huge moguls. Now, for those of you that don't ski, a mogul is where the snow has been carved out, and these were 6-foot monsters. So to cut a very long story short, I was sitting on a mogul, we were having a rest because we'd had a bindings check, or that's code for a fall, and the mogul gave way and I fell between 150 and 200 feet.
Wow.
Life was never to be the same again. Out of what went on, and we've not got time to go into huge detail, my mobility was significantly affected. In the summer holiday immediately after the accident, and I'd not long got back to school, my principal suddenly died in his sleep. And so I found myself to be the principal. And the one thing that I was really determined about is that my physicality, or lack of it, was not going to get in the way of the school doing well. I couldn't at times physically get into my classrooms. I was the principal there for over 20 years, and for the most part, I ran it from a wheelchair. Now, the huge gift in that was I had to find a different way of empowering people to take radical responsibility for their own performance and a shared responsibility for the team, because I couldn't be behind them. I couldn't physically get anywhere near them when they were teaching for the most part. And so this taking radical responsibility for self became the underpinning principle, and looking at how we could support one another in a very honest and professional way meant that the school was incredibly successful. And we were on the 100 best schools in England list twice during my tenure. And I left in 2004 because of my health. I was a workaholic. Work was great pain control. And I did a whole range of paid jobs while I was a serving principal, because our budget was so awful. And so I would do all of the preparation in my own time, just do the face-to-face stuff. So I worked for the National College of Leadership as a trainer facilitator, for the National College as an assessor trainer. I worked for the government as a workforce reform advisor, and so on, not all at the same time. But by 2004, bits were dropping off, and I was given the advice, if I did not stop what I was doing, I would be housebound within 18 months. So I left school and thought, what am I going to do now? I've got all of this experience. By this time, I was working with dozens of other head teachers and hundreds of teachers, helping them incorporate the same principles that we were using around lead yourself first, and then having got yourself into a place where you're the leader of your life, then lead others. So I thought, well, the problems we face in school must be the same in business. So I did a research project across businesses, found the jargon might be different, but the principles are the same. Wrote my first couple of books, and I started to work with businesses. And I've been helping businesses ever since by helping the leaders lead themselves, and then authentically lead by example, and in doing so, treasure their staff and their team and nurture the potential there. And as a result, holistic profitability is something that then comes naturally. And part of that holistic profitability, of course, is financial profitability.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely there. So I know in the healing world, oftentimes when people get to what they want to change or what they want to transform, they always want to be their authentic self, because at times we don't feel like we can be the people we are meant to be, because we do fear the judgment of others or the opinions of others there. But you have devised a lot of different ways, books, systems to help people to really step into their power, to be their authentic self, and then demonstrate it through their own leadership. So what do you think is the greatest tip that you can share that will really help people always remain true and authentic to themselves and keep it also on their spiritual side?
I think these may sound like different things, but they're interconnected. The first thing is, you're not broken. You are an amazing, unique human being. There is only one of you. And so for me, the first thing is to create a great, loving, non-judgmental relationship with yourself. Does that mean that everything is perfect? No, it doesn't. But I believe that the whole of our life is an opportunity to learn. And so be honest with yourself about the things that are good and celebrate those. And those things which you know need development, well, work on them. Use the same criteria for yourself as you do for everybody else. So many people are much more critical of themselves than they are of others, and take radical responsibility for everything you think, you feel, you say, and you do. 95% of most people's thinking is unconscious. it's an active choice to think consciously. And when you do, then you're better able to make that connection with yourself. And if you make that connection with your inner wisdom, it's easier to make your connection with greater consciousness, God, whatever you choose to call it.
Mm-hmm. So leading by example is really great. So you can always be your authentic self, and yet you train and show others how to do that. What was your greatest lesson for you where you got to lead by example to always be your authentic self?
I don't think it's one lesson. I think it's a series of situations. Integrity, I think, has always been very important to me. And I worked with two head teachers or principals where integrity was not something that was important to them. And so when I became a leader in that context, I was determined I wasn't going to do it that way. Mm-hmm. And I think many of us learn from a negative example that we have experienced that we don't want to do it that way. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the watchword is, how do I want to be treated? Would I treat myself, if I love myself, would I treat myself that way? And then how am I going to treat other people in that same way? Now, the caveat is that so many people don't love themselves. And so they treat themselves appallingly. You know, that voice in their head is constantly beating them up. And so for me, once you put integrity in place, then everything follows. And a really easy rule of thumb, if you imagine a horizontal line, above that are your core values: integrity, love, courage, strength, whatever they are. And then think of what are the behaviors that you need to experience for those to be met. And then get used to being aware of when you're approaching the line, of going under the line is not in line with your core values. So ideally, you stop before you get to the line. But once you're conscious of it, you know very quickly when you've gone below the line, and then you have the choice to change your behaviors in order to get back up above the line. But you've got to know what your core values are. And many people haven't got a clue.
Right. Right. I believe you hit the nail on the head there, because it's always about the virtues, the positive moral characteristics that we're learning here on a soul level. And those will override the negative talk, the negative self-doubt, the fears, all of that we have. And you hit upon one of my favorite core values, which was the word integrity, because I believe that is so incredibly important in today's world, because it does so much. So from your perspective, what does integrity mean to you?
I see integrity as an umbrella value. So we use these words, we bandied them about, and very often, you know, you've got a blueprint for what integrity means, and so have I. What you've done is actually quite rare. People don't question, what do you mean by whatever that value is, which is one of the reasons why relationships, personal and professional, break down. So for me, integrity encompasses a whole range of things. Being authentic. If you say you're going to do something, then you do it, unless there's a really good reason why not, and then you communicate it. It's about trust, fidelity, honesty. It's about turning up and being truly present in the moment. So for me, it's a very much an umbrella term, which means that you walk your talk, that you are the example you want in other people.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with that on so many levels. And it's also about being in alignment with who you are, your authentic self, with everything that you are doing. I remember my father growing up, he communicated integrity to me in different ways, but he always said, nope, I don't need to sign a contract. My word is my word. And if I say I'm going to do this, this is what I'm doing, because it's my word. And I didn't realize the significance of that growing up, but it is so ingrained in me that if I say something, yes, I'll do it. because that is my word. And to follow through, you have that integrity. Everybody here, we are talking with Gina Gardiner, and Associates. And we're going to take and pause just for a quick little break. And then we'll come back and we're going to find out more. Get what you always wanted. Abundant life is possible. Transform your lifestyle in just weeks with the most innovative system developed for heart-centered business professionals who seek change today. You are one step away from creating infinite prosperity, happiness, and love. Grab your bonus link now that's in the show notes. Welcome back, everybody. You are listening to the Healing Heart Podcast, and I am your host, Donna Campbell. My guest today is Gina Gardiner, and she has such a repertoire of experience. We've been talking about leadership and leading by example, but being your authentic self, as well as staying in your own spiritual empowerment. Now, one of the questions that I have here for Gina is, she is a multiple #1 international best-selling author. And Gina, I want to know more about your books. I love to read. And so what are a few of your books, and what are some of the things that you write about in those books?
So my first 2 books were my calling card, and that's Kickstart Your Career and Manage Your Staff More Effectively. And they were a distillation of all of the principles that I used in school. But I was I've always got a coach or mentor on. I practice what I preach. And at the time she said, what's your unique identifier? And I looked at her a bit blankly. And she said, well, you never talk about your disability. And at this time I could walk a very few steps. And she said, it's the elephant in the room. And so I wrote Chariots on the Fire. Chariots on Fire gives you a little bit about my story, and then talks about the principles that I used to live a powerful, positive life, despite the fact that I was wheelchair bound and, physically life was a bit tricky. The title is because so many people think of the wheelchair as a thing of lack. But for me, that was my empowerment. I could get in my electric wheelchair, always at full speed, and go roaring off, whereas I couldn't do that without it. So Chariots on Fire is that book. And I believe that disability is, my disability is that my mobility is not great. But if you're listening to this or watching it, what's your disability? How often do you diss your ability? I'm not good enough, I'm not tall enough, I'm too fat, too old, or whatever. You carry that with you because you're the common denominator in every moment of every day. At least with my wheelchair, I can get in the wheelchair and I can go steaming off at great speed. So that was the first of the, in a sense, the books that started to talk about my spiritual journey. Move on 2017-18, I'd moved on. By this time, I'd identified that my purpose was to really impact on as many people globally who, as leaders of their own lives and as leaders of other people and leaders of leaders, things had moved on. And so I wrote the 5 secret pathways to happiness, success, and fulfillment. It's thriving, not surviving, the 5 secret pathways to happiness, success, and fulfillment. And that looks at the 5 pathways of beliefs, of relationships, success, of change and transition, and of fulfillment. Since then, I've written a book about being happy, and we all, many of us at least, suffer from the problem, I'll be happy when syndrome. And so it was a 7-day happiness challenge. But more recently, I've written a stable of books, which are intentional journals and workbooks that proffer 1 or 2 principles and then give people the opportunity to really start to embed those in their lives. People are busy, they haven't got a lot of time. So the latest 2, one is my journey from human doing to human being. And I am a great human doer. I've had to learn to be much more of a beer. And I think that's one of the things that many people struggle with. And I share my struggle and the sort of things that I've been doing to really get myself much more aligned with the being part of me. And if you go on Amazon, there are books for leaders, there are books for empaths, there's books around health. The latest book is Living with Long-Term Illness, including long COVID and disability. And it's for the sufferers and their families about your illness doesn't define you unless you choose to let it. And they're tips and tricks that I've learned over the last 40 years.
Nice. I love that. And I'm going to definitely look up some of your books there because, you know, we're always learning and growing, and I always want to know more. One of the words you've touched on a couple of times, and I even in your introduction, was the word happiness. And I believe happiness is an inside job, because if you're internally happy, you have happiness on the outside. What is one of your greatest, happiest moments that you can share with our audience today?
The school did very well, as I said, and we were on the best 100 schools list. And as a result of that, I was invited to go to Highgrove, which is the home of now King Charles. He was Prince Charles. I'm a keen gardener. I love my garden and I love the natural world. And we spent the day there before we went and had drinks with now King Charles, and I had a 20-minute conversation with him, which was delightful, very far-reaching, from how does he have hostas with no slug holes in, to his boys, and then to much bigger things. But it was an end of May day, a perfect day. So we went through the formal gardens, and then we went through the meadow, which was just beautiful with mauve and gold and white, and then into the woodland where there's the most exquisite treehouse, and there were dog roses in bloom up the staircase into the treehouse, then into the walled vegetable and fruit and flower garden. And it was about 5 o'clock at night, and the birds were singing. There was an orchestra going on. I was in heaven. I loved it. I had such a fabulous day, and that memory will be etched on my brain forever.
I love that. I love that, because that is a one in a kind of experience for you, and to have that from having the ability with what you have, despite any limitations people may have put on you during that entire time for you. So truly, truly amazing. So Gina, share with us, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Well, I'm on Linktree. It's the usual Linktree link, and my name, Gina Gardiner with an I. You'll find me on YouTube, and I'd love if people would subscribe to Genuinely You with Gina Gardiner on YouTube. There's lots and lots of videos there. My website is genuinely-you.com. There are other websites, but you'll find all of those in Linktree. And yes, please do go to Amazon and have a look at the books that are there.
Perfect. And we're going to include all of that there in the show notes for everybody. So definitely follow Gina Gardiner on YouTube with the show Genuinely You, and access all of her information. She truly has a heart of gold, and is truly kind for sharing everything that she's been through, all of her information, knowledge, and wisdom with the world to really step into her own power to help you always be your authentic self. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. And don't forget to always follow the Healing Heart podcast as well.